Hi everybody, this is a video about mitochondrial function and creatine, and specifically how creatine can help to support mitochondrial function. The last couple of videos I posted were about how folks can have issues with post-exercise fatigue and symptoms flaring up, and there were just some questions somebody asked around that topic, so that was the focus of my last couple of videos. And I mentioned that creatine as a supplement can sometimes be one of the things that more quickly enables more exercise tolerance. So someone posted a question saying, in what way does that work, and how's that relationship? So I'm more than happy to talk about that. I think creatine and mitochondria are both fascinating topics, so talking about them both together, wonderful. As per usual, nothing I'm saying should be construed as medical advice. This is for informational purposes only. If you need medical advice, please talk to your healthcare provider to get that advice. So creatine relates to mitochondrial function in, this is all in my opinion and to my understanding, that it mostly relates to mitochondrial function because creatine provides a backup source of ATP. Mitochondria being the energy producing units in our cells, they, for all intents and purposes, produce virtually all of the energy for our cells. To my understanding, it's about 90% of all the energy for our cells. And that energy is in the form of this stuff called ATP. So creatine, it basically holds so the way ATP works is it catalyzes these reactions where ATP is this adenosine triphosphate. So it's this adenosine molecule that has three phosphate molecules attached to it. And so when a enzymatic reaction needs energy, then the cleavage of that, or the removal of one of the phosphates from the ATP, turning it into ADP, adenosine diphosphate, the energy that's released from that reaction sends the energy to the enzymes involved in this reaction to give them the energy they need to do the work that they need to do. So essentially, it's that release of that phosphate energy that drives the energy needs of the body for all intents and purposes. When creatine is converted into its breakdown product, which is creatinine, then it also releases a phosphate energy as part of that process. And so creatine is kind of this backup source of energy that we have in our cells. And generally, to my understanding, for the most part, we usually use that backup energy when we need it as backup energy. So if you're lifting heavy weights, or you're going for a run, or whatever it happens to be, that's when your body's going to say, okay, we don't have enough ATP to meet these demands. Where are we going to find our last little scraps? It's kind of like if you're you need to pay the pizza guy when he's delivering the pizza, and you're like, oh no, we don't have any cash. And I realize this is an antiquated analogy because everybody, for the most part, uses credit cards or their phones or whatever they use. I still use cash, but that's just me. It's like, okay, we got to look, under the couch cushions. We got to find the last dregs of change so we can pay this guy and get our pizza. So it's that type of scenario where the creatine energy, the creatine as an energy source, it's not a robust, infinite source of energy. It's kind of just this last little bit of energy that the cell can use when it really needs to do certain types of work. But as you can imagine, when folks are having a hard time making enough energy in the first place, when they're suffering from mitochondrial dysfunction, then that backup source of energy from creatine can become more important. So not a nice analogy, but a person's living on the street, they're not getting a regular paycheck, maybe that bit of pocket change is enough to kind of keep them going, because they can hopefully still buy some food and this and that, even if it's just kind of little dregs of change or whatnot. So those dregs of extra energy from the creatine in the cell can be enough to make the difference between whether somebody can tolerate going for that walk, or they can tolerate some other more vigorous type of activity or whatnot. So that's the relationship between creatine and mitochondrial dysfunction, and why that can be important. And so what's handy is that we can take creatine as supplements and boost up our creatine levels in that way, and kind of top up those last ditch effort reserves of energy, if you will, in the cell. The other way that creatine ties into energy is that making creatine actually requires quite a bit of cellular energetic resources. Creatine's created through the action of this enzyme called GAMT, which stands for guanidino acetate methyltransferase. And for methyltransferase means that it requires a methyl group, which is produced by the methylation cycle. And that's something that's a really important series of chemical reactions that happen in the cells of our body. And methylation requires a fair bit of energy. So another reason why supplementing supplementing with creatine can be helpful is because it takes some of the pressure off of off of the body to be creating more methyl groups for the purpose of creating more creatine. So it's kind of like, oh, it'd be sort of like if you were setting out, for figuring out your Saturday, and you're like me, you've got 3 kids and all these, different activities that, need to do, and just really busy. And, you're like, okay, I'm going to make this for the kids for breakfast and this for lunch and this for dinner. If somebody knocks on your door at 7 a.m. and like, hey, here's all the food for the day. It's in like, little heater containers, like just, like open and serve, and you're good for the day. Like, oh my gosh, like this made my day a lot easier. So similarly, when we give the body that gift of creatine every day, it's like, oh, I was going to have to put all this energy into methylating to make creatine, and now I don't need to. So there's a couple of reasons why creatine relates to mitochondrial dysfunction. So thank you for the question. If there's any outstanding questions about this topic or anything else, just post in the comment section below, and I'll do my best to answer as soon as I can.